The security guard put his hand on my chest. Not hard, not violent, just firm enough to communicate that I was no longer welcome in a building where I had celebrated every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone of my 32 years of life, and my brother stood behind him, laughing. Not chuckling, not smirking, laughing. The full, open-mouthed laugh of a 29-year-old man who has just watched his older brother be told he is not a member of his own family, and who finds this genuinely, deeply, entertainingly funny. Come on, Stellan, don't make this harder than it has to be. Henrik, you're having me removed by security. I'm having a non-family member removed from a private family proceeding. There's a difference. I'm your brother. You're not my brother. You never were. Mom just told you. You're adopted. You're not a Foss. You're not Dad's son. And you're not getting a dime of his money. The security guard, a man I had never seen before, hired, specifically for this meeting, which tells you everything about what kind of meeting it was, guided me toward the door of the attorney's office on West 10th Street in Erie, Pennsylvania. Behind me, the conference room held 3 people. My mother, Ingrid Foss, who had just told me I was adopted with the same emotional temperature she might use to tell me the dishwasher was broken. My sister, Britta, who had known since she was 16 and had kept the secret for 19 years with the particular competence of a woman who understands that secrets are currency. And Henrik, who was laughing. Behind them, on the conference table, were the documents that divided my father's $57 million estate, the lakefront mansion on Lake Erie, 3 luxury vehicles, $4.2 million in liquid assets, and a 50% ownership stake in Aldrich Maritime Industries, valued at approximately $50 million, among the 3 of them. Ingrid, Britta, and Henrik, the biological family, the real Fosses. I was not a real Foss. I was, according to my mother's words, which she delivered while looking at a point approximately 6 inches to the left of my face because she could not look at me directly, never really one of us. I walked out of the building, past the security guard, down the hallway, through the lobby, into the February cold of Erie, Pennsylvania, which is not a metaphorical cold. Erie in February is a physical assault, the lake effect wind cutting through clothing and skin, and pretense with equal efficiency. I got into my 2014 Honda Civic with 167,000 miles on it, and I sat in the parking lot, and I tried to understand what had just happened. My father, the man I had called Dad for 32 years, the man who taught me to change a tire and throw a football and shake hands with a firm grip, had died 3 weeks ago. Gunnar Foss, 64 years old. Heart failure. And in the 3 weeks between his death and today's will reading, my family had apparently been preparing for this moment, the moment when they would tell Stellan he was adopted, exclude him from the estate, and have him escorted out of the building by a man in a uniform. 3 weeks. They had 3 weeks to tell me privately, gently, with the compassion that a 32-year-old man deserves when he learns that his entire identity is a fiction. Instead, they chose to tell me at the will reading, in front of an attorney, with a security guard in the hallway, as a footnote to a financial transaction. You're adopted, you get nothing, please leave. You were never really one of us, Stellan. Those were my mother's words. The woman who packed my school lunches. The woman who drove me to Little League. The woman who sat in the front row at my high school graduation and clapped when my name was called. That woman looked at me across a conference table and told me I was never really one of them. And she said it with the composure of a woman who had been rehearsing it. But before I tell you what happened next, before I tell you about the private investigator and the phone call and the name that made me drop my phone, I need to tell you who I was before that conference room. Because the man who walked out of that building was a man who had spent 32 years believing he knew exactly who he was. And the man who walked in 2 weeks later was someone entirely different. My name is Stellan Foss, or at least that's the name I was given. I was born on April 14th, 1994, and I was raised in Erie, Pennsylvania, in a lakefront house on Peninsula Drive that overlooked Presque Isle Bay and Lake Erie beyond it, a house that was worth $2.8 million, and that I had just been told I had no right to. I grew up believing I was the middle child of Gunnar and Ingrid Foss. Britta was 3 years older than me, Henrik 3 years younger. We were a Norwegian-American family. Foss is a Norwegian surname, and my grandparents had immigrated from Stavanger in 1961. The family was proud of its heritage in the particular way that third-generation immigrant families are proud, displaying the flag, cooking the food, telling the stories, maintaining the identity even as the accent faded and the customs diluted. I believed I was Norwegian. I believed I had my father's jaw and my mother's eyes. I believed I was a Foss the way I believed the lake was cold and the winters were long, as a fact of existence that required no verification. My father, Gunnar, was the chief operations officer at Aldrich Maritime Industries, a Great Lakes shipping and logistics company headquartered in Erie. The company moved cargo across the Great Lakes, container shipping, bulk freight, port operations. It was the largest employer in Erie's maritime sector, and my father was its second most important executive, reporting only to the founder and chairman, a man named Aldrich Novak. I met Aldrich Novak exactly 4 times in my life, all at company events, the annual holiday, gala, the summer picnic, the kind of corporate functions where families attend and children run around while adults make conversation with drinks in their hands. Aldrich was a tall, silver-haired man with the posture of a sailor and the handshake of a man who had started a company with 1 cargo barge and turned it into a $310 million operation. He was polite to me, distant. The kind of distant that reads as formality, but that I would later understand was restraint. When I was 12, at the 2006 holiday gala, I shook Aldrich Novak's hand and said, "Nice to meet you, Mr. Novak." He held my hand for approximately 4 seconds too long, looked at my face with an expression I didn't understand, and said, "It's nice to see you, Stellan. You've grown." I thought he was being a polite boss. I didn't know he was looking at his own son. I didn't go to college. I went to work. At 18, I got a job at a mechanic shop on West 26th Street, Gorski's Auto Repair, and I found the thing I was good at. Engines, transmissions, brake systems, the mechanical logic of machines that do exactly what they're designed to do unless something breaks, in which case the problem is always findable and always fixable if you're patient enough to trace it. I have been at Gorski's for 14 years. I make $42,000 a year. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment above a hardware store. I drive a Honda Civic. I am, by every measure that the Foss family uses to evaluate human worth, unremarkable. Britta is in finance at Aldrich Maritime. Henrik is in sales at Aldrich Maritime. I fix cars. The family narrative was clear. Britta and Henrik inherited Gunnar's ambition. Stellan inherited his mechanical ability but not his drive. Stellan is the underachiever, the wrench turner, the one who could have done more but didn't. Now I understand why the narrative was so comfortable for them. It's easy to call someone an underachiever when you know they're not really yours. It's easy to invest less in a child's future when you know the child isn't yours. It's easy to introduce your son as Stellan, our mechanic, with a slight downturn of the mouth when you know that the word "our" has an asterisk next to it that nobody can see. I was the asterisk for 32 years. 2 days after the will reading, I was sitting in my apartment, eating cereal at 11 p.m. because I hadn't been hungry during daylight hours since the conference room, and I was looking at my hands. Mechanic's hands. Permanently stained around the cuticles, calloused on the palms, a small scar on my right index finger from a slip with a torquer wrench in 2019. I was looking at my hands and thinking, whose hands are these? Because if I wasn't Gunnar Foss's son, then the jaw I thought was his wasn't his. The mechanical aptitude I thought I inherited wasn't inherited, or maybe it was, but from someone else. The entire biological narrative I had used to explain myself to myself, I'm like my dad, I'm good with my hands, I got his build, I got his stubbornness, was fiction. Comfortable fiction. The kind of fiction that families build around adopted children to make the adoption invisible, until the day they decide to make it visible, at which point the fiction is stripped away, and the child is standing naked in a conference room wondering who the hell he actually is. I needed to know. I found Deacon Holt through a Google search. Private Investigator Erie, PA Adoption. Deacon's website was a single page with a phone number and a stock photo of a magnifying glass, which did not inspire confidence. But his Yelp reviews, 3 of them, all 5 stars, said things like, "Found my birth mother in 10 days," and "affordable, thorough, no BS." I called. Holt Investigations. I need to find my biological parents. I just found out I'm adopted. I'm 32. How much do you know? Nothing. My adoptive family told me at a will reading and then had security escort me out. That's cold. It was efficient. Fee is $200 up front plus expenses. Expenses are usually another $100 to $200. If I can't find anything, I refund the $200. How soon do you need this? Yesterday. I'll start today. Deacon Holt was 61 years old, retired from the Erie Police Department after 28 years, and operated out of a small office on State Street that smelled like coffee and old paper. He was not a dramatic man. He was not a movie PI with a trench coat and a drinking problem. He was a retired cop with a laptop and a network of contacts in county records offices, adoption agencies, and vital statistics departments across Pennsylvania and the surrounding states. He started with the adoption records. In Pennsylvania, adoption records are sealed, but can be accessed by the adoptee through a court petition or, in some cases, through the adoption agency's archived files. Deacon filed the petition and, while waiting for the court, used his contacts to locate the agency that processed the adoption, a private firm called Lakeshore Family Services that had operated in Erie from 1985 to 2003 before closing. The agency's records had been archived by the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services. 5 days after I hired him, Deacon called me. I found the agency records. The adoption was processed in April 1994, private adoption. The adoptive parents are listed as Gunnar and Ingrid Foss. That much I knew. The original birth certificate, the one filed before the adoption, is sealed, but I have a contact who can access the index. The index doesn't give me the full certificate, but it gives me the parents' names. And? Your biological mother is listed as Celine Marchand, French-Canadian, 27 years old at the time of your birth, last known address in 1994, Erie, Pennsylvania. Current address, Montreal, Quebec. My biological mother is French-Canadian? Yes, and your father— Deacon paused. The pause lasted long enough that I noticed it. Stellan, I need to make a second call. I need to verify something before I give you the father's name. Can you give me 3 days? Why 3 days? Because the name I'm seeing doesn't make sense in the context of a normal adoption, and I want to make sure I'm not making a mistake before I tell you something that will change your life. 3 days. I waited 3 days. I went to work at Gorski's. I changed brake pads on a 2018 Toyota Camry. I replaced a water pump on a 2016 Ford Explorer. I rotated tires on a minivan whose owner told me about her daughter's soccer tournament for 11 minutes while I nodded and smiled and thought about nothing except the phone call that was coming. On the morning of the third day, February 25th, 2026, Deacon called. His voice was different. Not calm. Not the methodical retired cop voice I had heard in our previous conversations. This voice had something in it that I can only describe as the sound of a man who has found something he was not expecting to find and is still processing the weight of it. Stellan, you need to sit down. I'm sitting. Your biological father is listed on the original birth certificate. I've cross-referenced the name with corporate records, property records, and employment records at Aldrich Maritime Industries. The cross-reference confirms what the birth certificate says. Deacon, just tell me. Your biological father is Aldrich Novak. Silence. My silence. Not the silence of a man who doesn't understand what he's heard. The silence of a man whose brain is processing a piece of information that is too large for the neural pathway it's traveling through. The information jams, the brain buffers, and for approximately 5 seconds I sat on the edge of my bed in my one-bedroom apartment above a hardware store, and I didn't think anything at all. Aldrich Novak, I said. The Aldrich Novak? The founder of Aldrich Maritime Industries, the man your adoptive father worked for, the man who gave your adoptive father a 50% ownership stake in his company in 1993, 1 year before you were born. Aldrich Novak is my father. Your biological father, his only biological child. He and his wife Dagny never had children of their own. You are his sole biological offspring. The phone fell. Not dramatically, my hand just stopped gripping. The phone hit the carpet, and Deacon's voice continued, small and distant, from the floor. Stellan? Stellan, are you there? I picked the phone up 30 seconds later. My hands were shaking the way they shake after I've been holding a wrench too tight for too long. A fine, muscular tremor that means the body is processing something the mind hasn't caught up to. I'm here. There's more, Stellan. Do you want to hear it now, or do you want to process this first? Tell me everything. Deacon told me. He had spent the 3 days between calls not just verifying the name but investigating the context. he had pulled. Corporate records showing that the 50% ownership stake was transferred from Aldrich Novak to Gunnar Foss in March 1993, 1 year after Gunnar was hired and 1 year before I was born. He had pulled the adoption agency records showing that the adoption was arranged through a private process, not through the state system, not through an open call, but through a specific directed placement. He had pulled property records showing that Gunnar and Ingrid Foss purchased the lakefront mansion in 1994, the same year I was born, for $340,000 in a neighborhood where they had no business buying based on a dock supervisor's salary. The picture is clear, Stellan. Aldrich Novak had an affair with a woman named Celine Marchand, who worked at Aldrich Maritime. She became pregnant. Aldrich couldn't acknowledge the child publicly without destroying his marriage and his company's reputation. So he made a deal with a trusted employee, your adoptive father, Gunnar Foss. Gunnar and Ingrid would adopt the baby. In exchange, Gunnar would receive a 50% ownership stake in Aldrich Maritime, a career path to the C-suite, and the financial means to raise the child in comfort. My father sold his company to buy himself a son. Your father gave away half his life's work to make sure his son was raised by someone he could watch. He chose Gunnar because Gunnar worked at the company. He could see you at company events. He could watch you grow up from a distance. From a distance. 15 feet according to the seating charts at the company holiday galas. I checked. 15 feet. For 32 years, my biological father had been standing 15 feet from me at company events, watching me grow up, watching me shake his hand at 12 years old and say, "Nice to meet you, Mr. Novak." And he could not say the words that every father wants to say when his son is standing in front of him. Why didn't he ever tell me? Because the deal with Gunnar included silence, absolute silence. Gunnar raised you, got the company shares, got the career, got the house. In exchange, Aldrich's secret stayed sealed. And my biological mother? Celine Marchand. She was 27 when you were born. She was relocated to Montreal with a $500,000 payment and a non-disclosure agreement. She's 59 now. She runs a bakery in Montreal. She has never married. She has no other children. She's been alone for 32 years. She's been waiting for 32 years. There's a difference. I drove to Chautauqua, New York, the next day, 60 miles from Erie. Aldrich Novak's waterfront estate on Chautauqua Lake, a sprawling property with a dock and a boathouse, and the kind of quiet that only money and water can produce together. I didn't call ahead. I drove to the gate, pressed the intercom. A voice, staff, not Aldrich, asked who I was. "My name is Stellan Foss. Tell Mr. Novak that Stellan Foss is here. He'll know why." 45 seconds of silence. Then the gate opened. I drove up the driveway, parked my Honda Civic, 167,000 miles, check engine light on, a fine mist of brake dust on the rims from the pads I'd been meaning to replace, next to a Mercedes S-Class and a Range Rover, and a boat trailer that cost more than my car. The front door opened before I reached it. Aldrich Novak was standing in the doorway. 72 years old. Tall, silver-haired. The same posture I remembered from company events, straight-backed, precise, the posture of a man who built things and expected them to stand. He was wearing a sweater and khakis, no suit, no formality, the clothes of a man who was at home and was not expecting what just arrived at his gate. He looked at me, the way he had looked at me at the holiday gala when I was 12, the way he had looked at me every time we had ever been in the same room, with an intensity that I had always interpreted as formality and that I now understood was love. Love held at a distance. Love measured in 15-foot increments. Love compressed into a handshake and a "you've grown," because the actual words, "you're my son," were contractually forbidden. "You know," he said, not a question. "I know." His face did something I was not prepared for. It collapsed. Not slowly, not gracefully, not with the composure of a 72-year-old chairman of a $310 million company. It collapsed the way a dam collapses. The structure holds and holds and holds, and then one crack appears, and the crack widens, and everything behind it comes through at once. He cried. Standing in the doorway of his waterfront estate, looking at his 32-year-old son who was standing in the driveway next to a Honda Civic with a check engine light, Aldrich Novak cried the way men cry when they have been holding something for so long that the holding has become the heaviest thing they carry. "Come inside," he said. "Please, I have 32 years of things to tell you." We sat in his study. A room with windows overlooking Chautauqua Lake, bookshelves filled with maritime histories and nautical charts, and on the desk, a framed photograph that I had never seen. A photograph of a baby, approximately 2 months old, being held by a woman I didn't recognize. "That's Celine," Aldrich said. "Your mother. And that's you. 2 months old. She sent me that photograph before she left for Montreal. It's the only photograph I have of you before the adoption. You kept it on your desk? For 32 years, my wife knows. She has always known." "Your wife knows?" "Dagny has known since 1992. I told her before you were born. She agreed to the arrangement because the alternative was losing me. She has lived with it, not happily, not easily, but with the particular endurance of a woman who loved her husband more than she resented his mistake." "Is that what I am? A mistake?" "You are the opposite of a mistake. You are the only thing I ever created that is more important than the company. I have $310 million in assets, Stellan. I would give every dollar of it to have been in the room when you were born." "Then why weren't you?" "Because I was a coward. In 1992, I was 38 years old, married, childless, and afraid. Afraid of losing Dagny, afraid of the scandal. Afraid of what the board would say, what the industry would say, what Erie would say. I chose my reputation over my son. And I have spent 32 years paying for that choice in the only currency that matters: time. Time I didn't spend with you, time I can't get back. You gave Gunnar half your company. I gave Gunnar 50% of Aldrich Maritime, approximately $20 million at the time, now worth approximately $50 million, in exchange for raising you. It was the most expensive adoption in history, and it was worth every share. He didn't raise me because he loved me. He raised me because you paid him. He raised you because I paid him, and then, I believe, he came to love you. Gunnar was not a bad man. He was a man who accepted a deal and, over time, found genuine affection for the child the deal involved. Whether that affection was love or obligation, I can't tell you. Only Gunnar could tell you, and Gunnar is gone. He left me nothing. The will excludes me specifically. Biological children only." Aldrich's jaw tightened. "I know. I've seen the will. My attorney has reviewed it." "You've been watching this?" "I've been watching everything. I watched the estate division. I watched your family, the Fosses, exclude you. I watched Henrik hire a security guard. And I waited, because the deal I made with Gunnar included my silence, and I was bound by that deal even after his death. What changed? You came to my gate, you said your name, and the deal ended because the deal was with Gunnar, and you are not Gunnar. You are my son. And my silence was never owed to the family that threw you out of a conference room. What happens now?" Aldrich leaned forward, the businessman replacing the grieving father, the way a professional mode activates when the personal mode has said what it needs to say. "Several things happen now. First, my attorney is reviewing your legal options regarding the Foss estate. The 50% stake that Gunnar held was given to him as compensation for raising you. It was not earned through work, not purchased with savings, not inherited from the Foss family. It was a payment, from me, for services related to you. Your exclusion from the estate that was built on your existence is legally challengeable. Can I win? My attorney believes you have a strong case. The will excludes you as a non-biological child, but the estate was funded specifically because of your adoption. The irony is legally actionable. What's the second thing? The second thing is my own estate. I have no biological children other than you. Dagny and I have no children together. You are my sole heir. I have already instructed my attorney to amend my will. Upon my death, you will inherit my personal estate, the other 50% of Aldrich Maritime, this property, and approximately $310 million in total assets. I'm a mechanic. Your grandfather was a barge operator. I started this company with one boat and a clipboard. The scale changes. The work doesn't. I don't know anything about shipping. Neither did I at 24. You'll learn if you want to. What if I don't want to? Then the money is still yours, and the company will be managed by the executive team, and you can fix cars for the rest of your life. But I hope you'll let me teach you what I know. I have been waiting 32 years to teach my son something. Anything. How to read a shipping manifest, how to negotiate a port contract, how to tie a cleat hitch, anything. I looked at this man. This 72-year-old stranger who was my father. This billionaire who had given away half his company to make sure I was raised near him. This man who had shaken my hand at 12 and held it 4 seconds too long because 4 seconds was all he was allowed. "Teach me the cleat hitch first," I said. He smiled. The first smile I had ever seen from Aldrich Novak that wasn't measured, wasn't corporate, wasn't the smile of a chairman at a gala. It was the smile of a father whose son had just said yes. "Come to the dock," he said. "I'll show you." The Foss family found out 3 weeks later. Not through me. Through the corporate grapevine, Aldrich's attorney had begun the legal process of recognizing Stellan Foss as Stellan Novak, biological son and heir, and the corporate filings at Aldrich Maritime updated the ownership structure to reflect the inheritance plan. Britta found out first. She worked in the finance department. She saw the filing. She called Henrik. Henrik called Ingrid. And Ingrid called me, the first time she had contacted me since the will reading. "Stellan, what is this? About Aldrich Novak? What about him? The corporate filing says you're listed as his biological heir. Is that true?" "Yes." "You're Aldrich Novak's son?" "I'm Aldrich Novak's only son." Silence. The specific silence of a woman who is recalculating, reevaluating, re-examining every decision she has made in the last month. The conference room, the security guard, the words, "You were never really one of us," in light of information that makes every one of those decisions catastrophic. "Your father, Gunnar, he never told me who your biological father was. He said it was a private adoption. He said the birth parents were unknown." He lied. He knew exactly who my biological father was. Because my biological father is the man who gave Gunnar 50% of his company and a career and a lakefront mansion in exchange for raising me. Everything you have, Ingrid, every dollar, every share, every square foot of that house, exists because Aldrich Novak paid Gunnar to raise his son, and the son you just threw out of a conference room is the reason you're rich. She didn't respond. I heard her breathing. I heard the sound of a woman standing in a $2.8 million lakefront mansion that she had just learned was purchased with her adopted son's existence. Is there anything? No, there's nothing. Stellan, if I had known, you would have what? Treated me differently? Been kinder at the will reading? Not hired a security guard? Ingrid, the test of a family is not how they treat you when they know your father is a billionaire. The test is how they treat you when they think you're a nobody. You failed the test. Stellan, my name, for the record, is being legally changed to Stellan Novak. Have a good day, Ingrid. I hung up. Not with anger. With the particular clarity of a man who has been shown, in the starkest possible terms, the difference between family and biology. The Fosses shared my address for 32 years. Aldrich Novak shared my blood, and the people who shared my address threw me out when the money was on the table, while the man who shared my blood had been standing 15 feet away for 3 decades, waiting for permission to say hello. Henrik called the next day. His voice was different. The laugh was gone. In its place was the specific, pinched tone of a man who has just realized that the brother he had security removed from a conference room is the biological son of the man who owns the company where Henrik works. Stellan, we need to talk. No, we don't. Listen, I didn't know about Novak. Nobody told me. You didn't need to know about Novak to treat me like a human being, Henrik. You laughed. You called security. You told me I was never your brother. None of that required knowledge of my biological father. All of that required basic decency, which you chose not to exercise. I was upset. Dad had just died. Dad had just died. And your way of processing grief was to humiliate your brother, adopted or not, in front of a security guard. That's not grief, Henrik. That's character. And now that you know my biological father is worth $310 million and owns the company you work for, your character is suddenly interested in reconciliation. Funny how that works. Stellan, don't call me again. 6 months have passed. It's August 2026. I am working at Aldrich Maritime Industries, not in the corner office, not as VP, on the dock. The same dock where Gunnar Foss started in 1992, loading cargo and checking manifests. Aldrich insisted, and I agreed, that I learn the business from the water up. Your adoptive father started here, Aldrich said on my first day, standing on the dock at 6 a.m., the Lake Erie wind cutting through our jackets. I watched him learn this dock over 6 months. He was good at it. You'll be good at it too. How do you know? Because you fix machines, and a shipping operation is just a very large machine with a lot of moving parts. You already know how to think about it. You just need to learn the parts. He was right. The dock work is physical. Loading containers, securing cargo, checking weight distributions, coordinating with crane operators and tug pilots. It's the mechanical logic I've been doing for 14 years at Gorski's, scaled up from engines to cargo ships. The principles are the same. Understand the system, find the inefficiency, fix it. Aldrich comes to the dock twice a week, not to supervise, to teach. He walks me through shipping manifests, port contracts, fuel logistics, the regulatory framework of Great Lakes commerce. He is patient in the way that men are patient when they are making up for lost time, and know that patience is the only speed that works. We have dinner every Thursday at his house on Chautauqua Lake. Dagny cooks. She is cautious with me, polite, the behavior of a woman who is welcoming her husband's secret child into her home with the particular grace of someone who has had 32 years to prepare for this moment and is still not fully prepared. She sets a place for me at the table. She asks about my work. She does not call me son. I do not call her anything yet. We are in the space between strangers and family, and the space has no name. I have spoken to Celine, my biological mother, by phone twice. Montreal, she cried both times. Not the crying of a woman in pain, the crying of a woman whose waiting is over. 32 years of carrying a secret, of honoring an NDA, of running a bakery in Montreal while her son grew up in Erie without knowing she existed. We are planning to meet in person next month. I don't know what to expect. I don't know what to say to a woman who gave birth to me and was paid $500,000 to disappear. I don't know if that's a conversation or an archaeology. The estate challenge is moving through the courts. My attorney, retained by Aldrich, funded by Aldrich, because a $42,000 mechanic cannot afford to challenge a $57 million estate, has filed a claim arguing that Stellan Foss was excluded from the Foss estate based on a fraudulent premise. The estate was built on the 50% ownership stake that Aldrich gave Gunnar specifically as compensation for raising Stellan. Excluding the person whose existence funded the estate is, in my attorney's words, like building a house on someone's land and then telling them they can't live in it. The Foss family has retained their own attorney. The case will take months, possibly years. I am not in a hurry. The money is secondary. The principle is not. Aldrich's will has been amended. I am listed as the sole heir to his personal estate. Upon his death, I will inherit approximately $310 million, including the remaining 50% of Aldrich Maritime Industries. Combined with whatever the estate challenge produces, I will eventually control 100% of the company my biological father founded and that my adoptive father was paid to manage. I am 32 years old. 6 months ago, I was a mechanic earning $42,000 a year, living above a hardware store, driving a Honda Civic with a check engine light that I kept meaning to fix and never did. Now, I am the biological son and sole heir of a man worth $310 million, learning the shipping business from the dock up, eating Thursday dinner with a father who waited 32 years to set a place for me at his table, and preparing to meet the mother who has been waiting even longer. I still haven't fixed the check engine light. Some things can wait, some things have been waiting long enough. Aldrich said something to me last Thursday. We were at the dock, end of the day, the lake going flat and silver the way Lake Erie does at sunset when the wind drops. He was showing me how to read a cargo manifest, line by line, container by container, the way he learned it in 1978 with one barge and a clipboard. Stellan, yeah? I held your hand for 4 seconds at that gala, when you were 12. I remember. I counted every second, because 4 seconds was all I was allowed, and I told myself 4 seconds of holding my son's hand is better than 0 seconds, and I held on to that for 20 years. You don't have to count anymore. I know, but I still do. Every Thursday dinner, every dock visit, every phone call. I count the seconds. Not because I'm afraid they'll end, because I spent 32 years without them, and I don't want to waste a single one. I looked at my father, standing on a dock he built, on a lake he sailed for 50 years, in a company he named after himself, Aldrich Maritime. Because when you build something from nothing, you put your name on it so the world knows who was here. My name is on it now too, not on the building, not on the filings, on the dock manifest, Stellan Novak, operations trainee, written in pencil, The way dock workers write things. Because pencil can be erased and rewritten as you move up. I'm moving up, slowly, the way barges. The move on Lake Erie. Not fast, not flashy, just steady and heavy and impossible to stop once they're moving. The Fosses told me I was never really one of them. They were right, but not the way they meant it. I was never one of them because I was always one of him, the man on the dock, the man with the clipboard, the man who counted 4 seconds and called it enough because enough was all he had. He has more now. So do I. And neither of us is counting anymore. This story was told to be heard. If it stayed with you, if the conference room made you angry, if the dock made you hopeful, if the 4 seconds made you think about someone you haven't held on to long enough, then do something with that feeling before it fades. Don't just scroll. Pick up the phone. Call the person who matters. Tell them what you've been counting in silence. 4 seconds, 4 years, 4 decades. Whatever it is, say it today. Because some people wait 32 years for permission to say 2 words, and some people never get the chance at all. And if you know someone who was told they don't belong, in a family, in a room, in a life, send them this story. Not because it ends well, because it proves that the people who decide you don't belong are not always the people who get the final word. Subscribe. Come back next day, the next story is already waiting.